Welcome to the Untold Science Women in STEM podcast series. This series is an initiative to foster gender inclusivity in science, regionally and worldwide. It's to bring inspiring talks and conversations with pioneering women who have significantly contributed to the world of science. Today, we are joined by recognized female scientists and known in the field of evolutionary ecology. Please welcome with me Dr. Lesley Lancaster.
Very good. Thanks so much for having me.
Joining us as a co-host is Samira Khalaji, a passionate researcher in the field of stem cell biology and genomics at the Center for Genomics and Systems Biology. She is also an enthusiast of diversity in STEM. She has passion for including more women in science and research as norms, and not as an exception, for simply having better science and more diverse discoveries. And she will bring her invaluable insight to our podcast. Together, we will explore the challenges of women in science, aiming to inspire and empower listeners along the way.
Dr. Lesley Lancaster is a professor in evolutionary ecology at University of Aberdeen. She studies how plants and insects evolve their thermal tolerance and resource use in response to climate change.
I will start with a small question. Would you be able to share with us a bit about your journey in the world of science?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from California, and I completed most of my early education there, all the way up through my first postdoc. So I completed my bachelor's degree in biology at the University of San Francisco. I then went on to complete my PhD at the UC Santa Cruz, where I actually studied social behavior and maternal effects in lizards, which was a completely different topic, but entirely fascinating. And then went on to do a postdoc looking at macroevolution in plants and the formation of biogeographic regions, which really captivated me. And I went from there on to do a second postdoc in Lund in Sweden, where I studied these range-shifting damselflies, a species I still work on. And they just show remarkably interesting evolutionary change as they're rapidly shifting northward in Northern Europe in response to climate change. And so from there, I got my faculty position at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland, which is an incredibly beautiful part of the world. And I'm super happy to be there. And I've been there for 10 years now.
Oh, this is quite a long journey, but interesting. Lots of traveling, apparently.
Yes.
How does it feel working with lizards?
Lizards are fantastic. I didn't really have much to do with lizards before that.
Okay.
I mean, I saw them around growing up in Southern California, but I never really considered them. I didn't have an interest in them per se, but it was the study organism that the lab I was joining was working on, and they are absolutely fascinating with all kinds of incredible social behaviors and really profound maternal effects.
Okay. So now you are master in catching lizards?
I could never be as much of a master as my PhD supervisor. I think he held the lab record of catching 180 lizards in a day. I think I just topped 50 lizards in a day. So it's so challenging.
There is a record.
Yeah, there's a record, definitely.
Lesley, what inspired you to pursue career in this field? Have you encountered any obstacles along the way? Is there any way that you managed to navigate around them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a pretty convoluted path for me. I was always interested in the natural world. I grew up in a rural town, and my dad was a pharmacist, and he had a strong interest in science. So he had obviously taken a lot of chemistry, but he'd also taken a lot of botany and biology in his education. And he was really keen on sharing his interest in natural history with me. So he would do things like we had chickens in the backyard, and he would take them out and dissect them with me so I could see the eggs and the oviducts and things like that when I was young. Take me on nature hikes, and he knew the names of all the plants. He had this kind of like photographic memory for that kind of stuff. So as always really interested in that, but I didn't think I wanted to do it as a career. When I first started my university degree, I was majoring in anthropology, and I was really more interested in human societies. But eventually I realized that wasn't the field for me. And then I thought maybe I would become a medical doctor. So I switched to a university that had a strong biology program, and I was taking all the pre-med classes, but I found that I really, really, really loved the ecology and evolution classes much more than the physiology side. So I ended up deciding to pursue a career in evolutionary biology from there. But the obstacles were there. So the first year I applied for PhD positions, I didn't get any. And I started to wonder if biology was the right field for me. And particularly, I was employed then as a lab research assistant in a schistosomiasis lab, which was also super fascinating. I really enjoyed it. But a lot of the PIs at that time were a bit discouraging of my interest in pursuing a career in science. They thought it would be, because it's such a time-consuming field that requires dedication, and I had indicated that I was interested in having a family and relationship outside of science, they kind of wondered if I should consider a different field, at that time, a lot of the women in the field were kind of not unmarried and childless. And so I was given some encouragement to look elsewhere for careers, and I applied to be a nurse practitioner at the same school where I was. Because I was also kind of, I'm still kind of interested in the medical side, but at least you don't have to go to medical school for so long. And yeah, long story short, I didn't end up getting into that program because I didn't have one of the prerequisites. So they were going to accept me, but they noticed that I didn't have this one physiology class that I would have needed to take. And they said I would have to defer a year, and I didn't want to wait a year. So instead, I just applied for more evolutionary biology PhD positions.
If you were to go back in time, would you change your opinion and try to pursue mid school again?
I don't think so. I mean, I do definitely still think nurse practitioner would have been a great field for me. I think maybe not med school. I like the nursing side a bit better because there's a bit more diversity in the roles that you can get into, and there's more of the patient care side. So I do think nurse practitioner would have been a great job. And sometimes I do think of that because they do tend to be quite in demand. You can move where you want, and it's a quite flexible role, but I don't have any regrets. I absolutely love my field. But that would have been fine too, I'm sure. I'm sure I would have been happy in that alternate life as well.
Okay, that was a quiet adventure.
Yeah.
So it's my turn. So I start with the first question. In what ways do you think diversity and inclusion contributes to innovation and progress in science research and development?
Diversity inclusion means that you have the largest pool of talent. Of course, it's a no-brainer. But in addition to that, of course, the workplace environment and the research culture are enhanced so much by having different people coming from different backgrounds, different perspectives. And that's both because of the wider world view that they bring, but it's also because I think the work environment that creates, where there's no one culture dominating. It means everybody's focusing on the science, everybody's treating each other as individuals and working together towards a common goal. And I actually think it solves a lot of problems where if you start having less diversity, sometimes there can be more conflicts if there's issues with one group dominating, for instance. So yeah, I mean, all across the board, it's absolutely fantastic. And who wouldn't want to work with the widest diversity of friends and colleagues?
So you have your own lab, right?
Yes.
So now you're mentoring like some students, researchers, and so on. So do you have more female researchers, students, or more male?
Right. It's been fairly even. I would say slightly more female, but that reflects kind of the wider landscape in the UK. There are more female grad students in my field than men.
Okay.
So I've had slightly more female than male, I think, but it's pretty even. It's pretty even. No, I think it's good that it's even as well, because I'm also slightly wary of a situation where, although it's great to be a female mentor where women work with women and men work with men, I also think that's not the best. The best is where everybody's working together.
So how important is mentorship in helping female students navigate the challenge of pursuing a career in science? So maybe you have some stories to share or...
Yeah, I mean, I think personally having a network, a support network and supportive mentors has been extremely important along the way. I mean, everybody has, especially people out there who are working on their PhD know this, when you sort of every Tuesday you feel like dropping out because, you know, it's so stressful and maybe your experiments aren't working and you're worried that your peers are advancing faster than you are. And I remember all those feelings. So having a supportive mentor who can help you with that, and as well as supportive peers, is absolutely fantastic. There was this article or this special issue that came out in Evolutionary Applications, and it was a few years ago now, and it was on women in evolutionary biology. It was great. I absolutely recommend reading it. So it was all research produced by excellent women in evolution, but aside from that, they each had boxes where they shared their personal experiences. And one person wrote, and I can't remember which person it was now, that that they were an older, you know, from the older generation, and they said that back in their time, women really needed a male champion. So if you didn't have a male champion, you were, you know, not going to get ahead. And I think there's still an element of that for women, and having a champion is very important. It doesn't have to be a male champion, hopefully not anymore. There are a few more prominent women who can be champions, and that's great as well. But I think it really helps having someone ahead of you who can help you pave your way. So having a champion is important for women. And I think it's maybe more important for women than men. And that is still a bit unfortunate that, you know, women still maybe aren't as conspicuous on their own in the field because of people's intrinsic biases. So having that is, I think, still important, although I'm very much looking for the day when that's not the case.
Okay. Sometimes I think young girls need to be encouraged to pursue their interest in science. It doesn't matter any subject, but can be in general in science. So what initiative or programs do you think are effective to encourage young girls?
Yeah, I think initiatives that really just are specifically geared towards that is really important. So a friend of mine, when I was at grad school, started a program for young girls called the Girl Game Company, where it was girls going out into communities of kind of underprivileged girls and teaching them how to code video games as middle schoolers, 12 or 13-year-olds. So I think any of these things where you're just really getting girls together and allowing them to pursue their interests in STEM subjects is, I don't know how effective it is. I don't have the stats, but I'm guessing it would be pretty effective.
So do you think that this encouragement should be started at a very young age, like primary school or later in high school, or at any age can be effective?
I think this age around 12 or 13 is probably the most effective, because the younger ages, highlighting gender differences may be not as important. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not a educational psychologist, but I feel from my experience and as a mother now who have a 13-year-old daughter, I do feel like this age, 12 or 13, is a really important one for female bonding and forging their identity. And if that can be done around STEM subjects and shared interest in that, that should be super great. I should say in my field, there is strong female interest in science. So we have the leaky pipeline problem kicks in later. So like I was saying, there's mainly female grad students, mainly female postdocs, not mainly, but, it's like 60% or something. But then it's just once it gets to the faculty stage is where it drops off.
We had this conversation, me and Samira, before we start, and we were like, in our center, it's like 2/3 are female.
Yes.
And one of the reasons that we thought of is like that female tends to like maybe biology more.
Yeah,
it's more interesting for them. Might be, could be. We are not expert, but this is our guess.
Yeah.
But as you said, it comes narrowed down when it comes to faculty positions.
It's when it gets to the faculty position. And I don't know what the driver of that is, but I've talked to quite a few. I've been on hiring committees, and I've talked to quite a few other colleagues who are on hiring committees. And I mean, I don't have all the stats on it, so don't quote me on it, but it does seem as if the number of applications from females tends to be lower. And I don't know why that
Is
is.
it because they envision more responsibilities, grant writing, more commitment to research, and they want to spare some time to family? Does it have to do with?
I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not
it's
sure.
hard.
Yeah, it is weird because when you're a postdoc and you're with other female postdocs, everybody seems to want a job. It might be that, there's just more barriers to applying for any particular job. And maybe there's some data out there that, I think I've read that men may be more likely to just throw their hat in the ring for positions that they're not sure if
This
they're
is,
qualified for. And
yeah,
maybe women.
unlike the woman, I think we are more perfectionist. If I want to put CV somewhere, it has to be perfect. I should have this.
I think-
So you put your own standard and you agree not to hire yourself somehow. So you stop. Or you think that, oh, okay, let me work more harder on it and I can reapply for it.
That could be part of it. I'm not sure. And then I also saw something that the attrition level of women in science continues throughout the career. So even at the professor level, women are more likely to drop out. And at that point, it's related to research culture, really. So they feel like they're undervalued throughout their...
So if they have like leadership at that point, maybe a little bit of encouragement can help to increase.
Maybe we just need to break through and get the critical mass at these stages so that we can all have more encouragement. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay. The next question, I think somehow we discussed this, but maybe you want to add something. Have you observed any positive shifts or improvements in the representation and support of women in science over recent years?
Definitely. So I feel that we have had more, there just has been an increase in female hirings, I would say, particularly. So even though perhaps the numbers of applications are still a bit lower, the proportional rate of hiring women. And I think a lot of that is down to, people actually being aware of this and making sure that they're trying to be fair and putting women on hiring committees and things like that. So I think a lot of these initiatives have helped, that there's some checks and balances to make sure that there's more fair practices when it comes to things like hirings and promotions. That all that's being looked at, and particularly things like criteria that are being applied for advancement are kind of more transparent. And just people being aware of their biases and trying to overcome them, I think has certainly helped. But there's quite some way to go as well, for whatever reason. But it's great to see more and more people, and especially I feel like the younger generation has more role models that are mid-career level now than I did. So when I was starting out.
Okay, so can you highlight some notable achievements or breakthroughs made by women in your field?
Yeah, so my field has so many amazing women in it that it's fantastic. It's a lot of what I look at is kind of big picture questions about how organisms are responding to climate change across the globe. So these kind of macroecology type questions. And a lot of the leaders in that field are women, so that have led on many of the ideas and the global databases that we can use to answer these questions. So I would say Maria Darnellis, Jennifer Sunday, Sarah Diamond, and Regan Early are some of the leaders in the field who I think of as being particularly incredible and inspiring, and have made a lot of the main breakthroughs in understanding broad-scale distributions of traits and species.
Okay, great. So do you think still educational institution and workplaces must provide more support and empower for female students and professionals in science, or that's enough?
Yeah,
already?
for sure. So back when we were talking about the obstacles and how I've overcome them, there was one additional thing that was the birth of my first daughter. I only have one daughter, my first child who's a daughter. And that was a really confusing time for me because I was quite focused on becoming a mother. And I did take time for that really important and personal aspect of my life. And I had a hard time focusing on my research for, I would say, about 2 years, where I couldn't really care about the field. I really just cared about, this event in my life, this new person that I was bonding with. And I considered again dropping out of science at that point because I wanted to spend more time with my daughter. And it is quite a time intensive field that we're in. But it was when she was about a year old that I started to rekindle my interest in science, and I became repassionate about it again. And then I was happy to start learning how to balance those two things. But I think that could happen to any woman who wants to have children. She could have this experience of taking some time away from caring about the field. And who knows how long that could last. It was a year for me. It could have been, a month, or it could have been 5 years, or it could have been 10 years. So I think more initiatives to help women return to science after a period of leave. And I think we could extend this to men as well. So allowing people to take time for personal life and then come back, and allowing for that in our evaluations of people, and more initiatives to help people return. That would be super helpful.
So how long did you take motherhood off?
Well, in the US, we don't really get extended maternity leave. So I had 5 months sort of off, and then I returned to work, but I struggled. I struggled with it mentally until the end of the first year, and then I got excited again.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this very insightful and great reflection on your own experience. I want to ask you if you have any advice that you would give to the young women who aspire and they want to pursue the career in science, regardless of the challenges that they might face.
Yeah, I would just encourage them to, stick with it, obviously, if you really want to, and even if you don't feel like it, as I've just recounted. You can come back to it if you like. I would also just encourage everybody to remember why they're interested in science, and to try not to get caught up in some of the culture that might not be so conducive to women. So if you know why you're passionate about research and what you're interested in pursuing, which could be the questions as well as the environment and the people and the support and everything you like about science, I think it's important to stay focused on that, because there's a lot of bad advice out there that's sort of geared towards people being, career climbing or careerist, and, just things that might not be quite as relevant or as inspiring. So I think just trying to keep focused on what you like and what you want out of it. Keep what you like out and what you want out of it, and try as much as possible to ignore the rest. And also just to have a good and healthy work-life balance, and make sure that you're not giving more time to it than you're comfortable with, because it will be there.
Can you touch base on what do you like about your job?
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I love my job. I really love the questions, and I love the data. I'm a total geek. So if I get data, I'm super excited about that. So, and I love doing field work, which is fantastic. But I also really love the people. So my colleagues and my students, it's just great. I love interacting with them, and I love being able to offer support if I can to the students. I love teaching the undergrads and inspiring them if I can, hopefully. And I love, supporting my students. And I love, travel to conferences like this and meeting new people, and just the new experiences that this brings. So this is my first visit to the Middle East completely and entirely. So I wouldn't be here. Yes, I don't think I would be here right now if it weren't for, this job and the opportunities it brings to travel. So I'm really grateful for that.
Aside from that, when you feel during the day you have a long day or anything, do you have any mechanism to cope with the stress? Do you have any advice how you can feel more relaxed?
I do think that it's a good idea to, try to eat well and get enough sleep and not drink too much coffee and do yoga. All those things definitely help, but you don't always get around to it, and it's not always possible. For me, I've talked about my family a lot, but I think that makes a huge difference, is to have people in your life that are support groups, so that you realize constantly what's important. So you have people that you're focusing on, people that you can nurture and help outside of work. So that's it. That makes a huge difference. But also just like going on walks and gardening, cooking, little things.
Yeah, it can add up.
It can add up.
Yeah. To the enjoyment of research
Yeah. Well,
and resolving the puzzle.
resolving the puzzle. Yeah, we can resolve the puzzle while you're doing it.
Lesley, I'm so glad that you joined us for today and that you were able to share with us your experience and insight. I also would like to thank you, Samira, for co-hosting. Thanks,
my
Lesley.
pleasure.
Thank you, Samira.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been nice.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us today. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we will continue exploring these important topics with another remarkable guest. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and join us in the Untold Science Women in STEM. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.